In this video, we're going to take a look at materials. Now, the word materials is also synonymous with the word shaders. They both basically mean the same thing. A shader, or material, describes the makeup of a surface. It controls how light is absorbed or bounced off of that surface. It also helps define what the surface is made out of. And when we talk about what the surface is made out of, we're referring to the real-time or real-world counterpart. For instance, if we were trying to replicate concrete, we would want to change our material to take on concrete-like properties. Without a shader or material, the surface cannot be rendered. So if we have a surface without any type of material on it, it's going to render basically invisible. We won't be able to see it. Let's take a look at some example materials. We're going to create just a primitive object, and we'll create a polygon primitive torus. And we'll hit F just to frame that up. Now, all objects inside of Maya, when we first create them, are automatically assigned a default material. And that default material is a Lambert shader. And I can click on that inside of my attribute editor and see the Lambert shader properties. And we also get a sample of what that shader looks like. Now, I can assign a different material to my surface by right-clicking on the surface and scrolling down, and here we have Assign New Material, Assign Favorite Material, or Assign Existing Material, and we can choose from any one of those. I'm going to stick with our Lambert shader for right now, and we'll take a look at its attributes. And we'll move over here into the attribute editor, and I'm going to copy this tab so we can see it just a little bit better and expose more of those attributes there. And my first channel that I have is just the color channel. Now this one's real simple. We can click on the color swatch there, and we have several different options for changing the color of our material. We can use the color wheel or the color bars, and we can even choose from predefined colors up at the top. And when we move our mouse off of there, it automatically closes that color swatch down. Now we can also just change the slider, and this will give us just a difference in the value of that current color. Now if you take this all the way down to black, and then when you go back to raise it up, it's going to be white. So it's just kind of an easy way to clear the color off of there if you want to. And I'm just going to go back now to my color history here. Now I can see that that first green color shows up in this little color palette section here. So I can go ahead and choose that and keep that as my color. Now we can also click on the eyedropper and sample any color that is in our viewport. And I'm just going to click back over here on our green, and we'll just keep that. The next attribute we have is the transparency channel. This will alter the visibility of our object. And below that we have our ambient color. And then we have our incandescence color. And we can treat those just like we did with the color channel. Clicking on the color bar will bring up our color chooser. I'm going to assign a new material. I'm going to right click on our object, and we'll go down and we'll choose from the favorite material list. And we're going to assign a blend shader. And once again, I will copy that tab so we can see this a little bit better. And now we have a blend assigned. And now notice when we change from the default Lambert 1 and assign it a new material, we can now change the type. The original default Lambert shader, we're not allowed to make any changes when that material is assigned. If we assign a new shader, we can then go through and choose from different shaders from our shader list here, or our type. I'm going to leave this now just as a blend, and you can see we have lots of the same channels that we had there before, but we do get some new ones that we did not see with the Lambert shader. I'm going to zoom up to our torus here a little bit more, and then I'm also going to choose Select down here, which will select the shader and then in effect deselect my object. That way we can see that shader a little bit better. Blend shaders come with a specular highlight, and we can see we have the attributes for the specular shading in the specular shading rollout here. And the first attribute I have is the eccentricity. This controls the size of the specular highlight or hotspot. So if I change this, and we'll just grab the slider there, you can see that increase. And we can make that hotspot a little smaller or larger, depending on the type of surface or material we're trying to replicate. Next, we have the specular roll-off. The specular roll-off is the ability of the surface to reflect its surroundings. So as we increase it, it will also increase the amount of light that is being reflected off of it, whereas our eccentricity controls the actual hotspot. Now we can also control the specular color. So again, we can click on this, and we'll just go with a red here, and change that specular color. And then below that, we have the reflectivity. Now we're not going to be able to see the reflectivity here in real time. Plus, we don't really have anything out in our world that our surface can reflect. It's still a blank universe out there. But the reflectivity will make that surface actually reflect its surroundings. Now I'm going to go back up and just change my surface type again, and we're going to go from a blend to an anisotropic. Anisotropic allows us to control the specular highlight a little bit differently. Again, we'll copy the tab, bring this up here, and let's scroll down. And you can see under the specular shading rollout, we have a different set of attributes. Anisotropic materials are good for simulating light effects on a surface with very small detail, because that will cause that specular highlight to break up or to react differently. And with the anisotropic material, we can change the angle of that specular highlight as well as the spread. So we get a lot of great control there over that. Another material we have is a Phong material. Phong is very similar to our blend material, but a little bit better suited for replicating things like plastics, where blend is good for metal type surfaces. And the Phong is a bit simpler because we just have a cosine power for that specular highlight, just one simple channel there to control it. And I'm just going to return back to our Lambert shader, and a Lambert shader is good for objects that don't have a specular highlight. It still bounces light off of it, but it does not have that hotspot that we might see with plastics or metal. Something with like a more matte type finished surface, or even something like chalk. Lambert shader is going to be perfect for that.